Tonight, from U.S.-occupied Baghdad, U.S. officials tell CBS News there's new evidence that Saddam Hussein may be dead as U.S. troops hunt down members of his regime using a deck of cards. Baghdad burns again, and the city is in chaos. We'll give you a look at the struggle to bring order to a capital running wild. In the north, more looting and violence as another major Iraqi city falls. And Baghdad's hospitals in critical condition, short on everything but wounded.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Tonight, special coverage of America at War. From Baghdad, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. U.S. forces occupy this city tonight. They dominate Baghdad, but they do not yet, completely control it. The Saddam regime is history, but the war is not over, and Baghdad is still racked by fear, chaos, and anarchy. There are new explosions and gunfire. In places, Baghdad is burning again, and looters have a virtual free hand. Against this backdrop, U.S. officials say there is growing evidence, but no confirmation, that the man who once used terror to rule this city with order may indeed be dead.
I don't know the whereabouts of Saddam Hussein. I don't know if he's dead or alive. I do know he's no longer in power.
Now U.S. forces are pressing the hunt for key members of that broken regime.
They're either dead or they're running like hell.
The U.S. military has given troops special decks of cards with pictures of the fugitives. Saddam is the ace of spades. In northern Iraq today, government troops abandoned the city of Mosul, which promptly erupted with a mixture of celebration, chaos, and looting. Looting also remains a big problem in Baghdad. U.S. commanders say they don't have enough troops to stop it. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld shrugged the looting off as, quote, untidiness in a time of transition. The ouster of Saddam Hussein's regime and the near total collapse of his military still leaves hanging a big question. Where is Saddam? Is he alive or dead? CBS's David Martin at the Pentagon has the latest hopes of official Washington about that and the big picture of the war in general. David?
Dan, for the first time since the war began, the U.S. has monitored phone calls in which members of the Iraqi regime are telling each other Saddam is dead. Now, that doesn't prove he's dead because the calls are not all consistent about the time and place of his death.
Some of the intercepted calls say he was killed in the surprise attack with cruise missiles and stealth fighters on the first night of the war, even though he subsequently appeared on tapes broadcast by Iraqi TV. Other calls say he was killed Monday when a B-1 bomber dropped 4 2,000-pound bombs on a pair of buildings he was believed to be in. Intelligence officials say they are tipping toward the conclusion Saddam really is dead, but Defense Secretary Rumsfeld is not yet convinced.
I've not personally seen enough intelligence from reliable sources that would enable me to walk up and say that I have conviction that he's dead.
There's not much doubt about the state of the Iraqi military. It's finished as a fighting force. This one-sided gun battle took place earlier this week outside a military compound when a bus surprised a company of Marines. Already taking small arms fire and on edge because of reports of car bombs, the Marines shot first and asked questions after.
Look at this. Seriously, I've never seen so many tanks in one spot in my life.
The crew of an Apache helicopter gunship could have shot up those abandoned tanks, but they held fire, knowing the Iraqi government will need to have some sort of army.
This is huge. I can't believe we're just sitting here. Yeah, I know.
With the North now wide open, the U.S. plans to fly in 2,000 Marines from ships in the Mediterranean to aid in the hunt for fleeing regime members. Tanks are also being flown into the North, but they may not be needed. Even the regime's final fortress in Saddam's hometown of Tikrit shows signs of collapsing. A Predator reconnaissance drone spotted abandoned fighting positions at the regime complex of palaces and barracks and signs of looting in the nearby town.
Members of Saddam's own clan are now said to be fleeing Tikrit. And tribesmen have arrested 2 of Saddam's half-brothers along the road to Syria. So it may well be that Saddam's regime just does not have a last stand left. Dan?
We arrived here in Baghdad after driving 500 miles from Amman, Jordan, spending a night with U.S. troops under fire, and then spent this day out and about seeing firsthand a sprawling city without law and order. Baghdad is burning tonight again. This is the Ministry of Planning, attacked by U.S. bombers a few days ago, now finished off by looters who seem intent to burn what they can't carry. What they can carry, they are tripping over themselves to take. At the Al Rashid Hotel, U.S. military, who now say they are here to restore order, are thin in numbers, and for today at least had to confine themselves to watching as chaos continued. But vigilance remains at its highest at Baghdad checkpoints following yesterday's suicide bombing that victimized Marines. Today, a family of 3 was killed and a 5-year-old girl injured after the U.S. said the driver of the vehicle failed to stop. As we drove in from the countryside towards the center of Baghdad, signs of devastation were everywhere, as were U.S. soldiers, eager to show their flag and give a wave at their moment of victory. Saddam's fabled parade grounds, a place where foreign cameras were never allowed before, now is littered with barbed wire and tanks. And while symbols of Saddam's opulence were clearly the target, there were others caught in the crossfire. One of the hallmarks of Baghdad right now is this, the burnout hulk of an automobile. They're all over the city, and in this one is a body. Clearly what happened, he was trying to get to or away from someplace, got shot through the windshield. Who shot him? Who knows? Unlike the celebrations of earlier in the week, many of the streets of Baghdad are now deserted. Fear rules. Among the few people we did see out, all were wary, but they all said they had gratitude for what they called their liberation.
We are happy when we see them. We said, salute, salute, down Saddam Hussein, long live America, British.
And then the moment that has become the daily ritual here. With so many statues all over the city, this will continue for days to come.
From what they said, there's a shot to his leg. I gotta go and...
We'll get on with your work. As will U.S. soldiers and Marines like this one, running off to give medical attention to a wounded man. Not an American, but an Iraqi civilian named Nasser, who had stayed by his store to protect it from looters. He was shot in the leg by what he said was an Iraqi soldier.
The ambulance should be in about 10 minutes.
While help may come easy, trust does not. The wounded man's friend, there to lend comfort, is frisked before being allowed to help with the rescue. In northern Iraq today, forces loyal to Saddam Hussein defending the city of Mosul disappeared, melted away without a fight. And as CBS's Alan Pizzi discovered, when tyranny suddenly gave way, pent-up anger erupted.
Liberation for the city of Mosul meant anarchy. No U.S. troops or Kurdish Peshmerga guerrillas to keep order, but people with guns were looters. And they took anything and everything they could lay their hands on. The central bank was trashed. Notes bearing Saddam Hussein's face were turned into confetti. And to add to the chaos, an Iraqi army depot was plundered. AK-47 assault rifles and even rocket-propelled grenade launchers were grabbed at will. A handful of Peshmerga tried to stop it, but the greed of the looters defied their efforts.
As widespread as the looting was, not everyone here was happy to seize the spoils of victory. When are the Americans coming, many people asked. Arabs in particular felt threatened, fearful not only of the anarchy, but also of the Kurds.
This burning building is why. It holds the records of homeowners. And the Arabs, brought here by Saddam after he forced Kurds out, believe the Kurds will burn the records and then claim their houses.
I want America to come to Mosul.
Why?
The security.
There is no security in this country.
No security.
We need security.
But many others said U.S. forces were not welcome.
Iraqi policemen must come back to street to control all these.
But Iraqi military and police barracks have been bombed to rubble. All that remained of Saddam's forces here were weary soldiers who had thrown away their uniforms. We have no cars, this man says, so what else can we do but walk? They were going home, 250 miles to Baghdad. Few here are pro-Saddam, but the arrival of an Iraqi flag and a cry of "God is great" spurred the crowd to turn on the closest symbols of the West, TV crews. Again, the few Peshmerga could do nothing. Speakers at Friday prayers called on people not to loot, but theirs was a lonely and unheeded cry in the wilderness of anarchy. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Mosul.
Also here in Baghdad is CBS News correspondent Lara Logan. She spent the day talking with U.S. soldiers and Marines who fought their way into the city and seeing firsthand the anger of some Iraqis toward people who worked for Saddam Hussein.
The ugly face of revenge that many people here had feared. This man is suspected of being part of Saddam's brutal regime. The angry crowd exact bloody retribution. Stopping these attacks will fall to the men who liberated the city.
We feel like we've won the war against them. Now it's all about turning to a peacekeeping role. This is much harder.
First Lieutenant Jay Phillips led his men through intense fighting to get to Baghdad.
So that's the luckiest man in the Marine Corps right there. He's got 5 bullet holes right there around where he's sitting from one day, and then he's got shrapnel in his back from another day.
Their mission today is to assess damage done to a school so they can get it repaired and running again. But every inch of Baghdad is still hostile territory.
Just yesterday we were ambushed with RPGs and machine gun fire, and in the neighborhood, you don't really know how to take a friendly smile, whether they're just luring you in or they're genuinely glad to see you.
Navigating unfamiliar streets is difficult. When the Marines finally arrive at the school, they discover it's inside a mosque, so they stay outside to avoid desecrating sacred ground. The welcome is not what they'd hoped for.
Saddam is not here, so we are happy. But we don't want American soldiers. After 6 or 7 months, they have to leave.
Others here may want them out sooner.
We've just been told by the Marines that the shooting is still going on, so we have to move out.
It's not what Marines would call combat, but after what they've survived, they're not taking any chances. Lara Logan, CBS News, Baghdad.
President Bush went today to military hospitals in the Washington, D.C. area, thanking those wounded or hurt here in Iraq, thanking them for their service and for their sacrifice. The president awarded Purple Hearts to a dozen of the troops and saluted their dedication and loyalty.
A young man looked you in the eye and said, "I can't wait to get back to my unit. I hope I'm healed fast enough to get back to Iraq." It's a brave lot.
The president said the most touching moment of his visits was when he stood witness as 2 soldiers, one from Mexico, the other from the Philippines, were sworn in as U.S. citizens. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News from Baghdad, healthcare hell. Iraqi hospitals undersupplied, understaffed, and under the gun, and swamped by too many badly wounded patients. The International Red Cross said today that Iraq's hospital system has virtually collapsed amidst a power vacuum and looting. And the Red Cross said that as an occupying power, the United States, under international law, has the responsibility to keep Iraq's hospitals running. CBS's Lee Cowan reports on Iraqi hospitals in crisis.
Walk into any Baghdad hospital these days, and the depravity is almost as consuming as the stench of death. Sterile is an unknown word here, and increasingly, so is a medical degree. Dr. Edison Norman is down to just 2 residents, 1 surgeon, and no nurses. All of them fled out of fear. So far, none have returned out of duty. It's this desperate all across the city, all across the country. And that's not the worst of it.
This is the second day our hospital have no any anesthetic.
No anesthetic, no power.
No power.
No water.
No water, yeah.
But lots of patients.
More than 100 today alone, including this man, injured not from coalition bombs or bullets, but from looting by his own people. There wasn't even a bed to give him.
That is not the case, however, for every hospital. This one, for example, one of Baghdad's largest, is completely empty because of looting. Over the course of 2 days, ordinary Iraqis came in and took whatever they could find, all the way down to the mattresses on the gurneys.
And worse, doctors have now been replaced by an armed militia, religious volunteers who are trying to fill the need they blame the U.S. for neglecting.
The most important and the big power in the whole world can't protect a little hospital, so it's work here? I don't understand it.
Most militiamen are Shiite Muslims who have been hoping to edge their politics into Saddam Hussein's power base for years. Fundamentalists have been using the tactic elsewhere in the Middle East for decades. What better place to start here than healing the wounds of the would-be faithful?
I don't know anything about hospital work, but I come here only because I want to protect this hospital.
The U.S. isn't alone in the race for hearts and minds here, but with so many trying so desperately to reach out, the first hand to take it may just be the one who wins. Lee Cowan, CBS News, Baghdad.
Not only have looters cleaned out many of Saddam Hussein's palaces, another luxury symbol of his power, his yacht, has also taken a beating. The Al Mansour, heavily damaged by U.S. airstrikes and cut loose from its moorings, is now adrift in the Persian Gulf south of Basra. I'll be back with more from here in Baghdad later in the broadcast. But now the CBS Evening News continues from New York with Harry Smith. Harry?
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. It's another embarrassing disclosure in the latest FBI spy scandal. A second former agent admits to an affair with a woman who is now being held as a suspected double agent for China. One of the former FBI men just resigned as head of security at Lawrence Livermore, a U.S. nuclear defense lab, but is not accused of any crime. The other is accused of passing classified information. We'll have more CBS News straight ahead. It is now virtually certain that President Bush's tax cuts will be limited to $350 billion, half the amount he originally proposed. Senate Republican leaders, worried about the deficit and the cost of the war, agreed to pare back the tax cuts as part of a deal on the overall Bush budget for next year. Authorities in Yemen are hunting for 10 suspects in the bombing of the USS Cole after they broke out of prison. They had been in custody since shortly after the October 2000 bombing that killed 17 American sailors aboard the destroyer. Officials are investigating whether the fugitives had help escaping the tightly guarded prison. In Congress today, the House passed an energy bill that would allow drilling in a wildlife refuge in Alaska. Senate opponents vow to kill that section of the bill. And updating a CBS News investigation of blood safety problems at the Red Cross. The FDA says it has reached an agreement with the Red Cross to correct those violations. The Red Cross will pay heavy fines for any future problems, such as shipping infected blood or failing to screen out risky donors. That's the news on the home front tonight. I'm Harry Smith in New York. Dan Rather will have more from Baghdad when the CBS Evening News continues in a moment.
It was late February. We were last here in Baghdad to interview the man who then ruled this city, this country, with an iron fist. We returned last night to a very different world. A few short weeks ago, the drive to Baghdad from the west was a day-long voyage through spectacular desert beauty. Now it is a treacherous journey through hell on earth, horrible scenes of death and destruction everywhere you look. Fear is in the air everywhere. It is your constant companion. To travel these roads is to risk your life. That truck up ahead, is there an assassin inside waiting for the next American? Is everything about to go terribly wrong? A U.S. patrol breaks the tension, at least for a moment.
Passports, ID cards.
Soon it is night, and the feeling of danger returns and deepens. Armed men in Arab clothes appear out of nowhere, then vanish. Killers, some of them Arabs from other countries, many of them Saddam loyalists out for revenge for this invasion that has toppled their government and left their streets littered with the ruins of war. There are still glimpses of the Iraq that was, not long ago, of its imperial past. But weapons of war have changed the landscape forever. And that's part of our world tonight. Bob Schieffer will interview Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld Sunday morning on Face the Nation. And later tonight, 48 Hours investigates.
The hunt for Saddam, sightings in the Middle East, reports of secret tunnels out of Baghdad. Will DNA reveal if he's dead or alive? 48 Hours investigates tonight.
As the war and unrest continue and intermingle with America's future, we'll be reporting to you from here inside Iraq in the days ahead. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting tonight from Baghdad. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, log on to CBSNews.com. This is CBS.